Last night was amazing. Same time next week, honey? A single text message sent to my wife destroyed our 2-year-long happy marriage. It wasn't spoken aloud. It just appeared on a computer screen. But its destructive power was greater than a bomb. Before I read those words, my world operated in a clear order. I had my duty, my honor, and my family. But that message became a new command. The beginning of a war. Not in the books. A war I was not trained to fight, but was determined to win. To understand this, you have to know what we once were before everything fell apart. I am Reese Kincaid. At 42, as a Marine Major, my life is governed by two things: discipline and honor. At Camp Lejeune, everything follows that order. Always faithful, and next to me was Annalise. She wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor, the place I returned to after every storm. For 12 years, the most familiar sight was coming home after a long, tiring day and seeing her there. She would wrap her arms around my neck, take a deep breath and say, "You're home." Just those 3 words were enough to wash away every burden. "How was your day?" she would ask, with a smile in her eyes. "The same as every day," I would reply, pulling her closer. "But it's better now. We were once a cohesive unit. We understood each other, trusted each other, without the need for explanation. I trusted her as I trusted my compass, my true north. But any fortress can be attacked from within. The ground beneath my feet began to crack so slowly that at first I told myself it was just my imagination. But the signs became clearer, impossible to ignore. It started with shopping trips to Raleigh. It takes almost 2 hours to drive to Raleigh. Going shopping, there was an effort, not a spontaneous decision. Yet suddenly, it became a weekly habit. "I'm going with the Miller sisters," she would say, her eyes looking away. But why drive 4 hours round trip just to buy a few things that were also available here? The Millers, I thought. It was the Millers last week, too. The soldier's logic inside me couldn't stop questioning. Then came the phone. It became a foreign object in our own home. Before, it always lay face up on the table. Now, it was always face down, as if hiding a secret. I saw her giggling while texting, a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. But when I walked into the room, the smile vanished. The phone quickly put away. An invisible wall was being built between us, brick by brick. And finally, the coldness. It was subtle to the point of being chilling. The goodbye kiss in the morning was now just a mechanical touch of the lips, without warmth. On our big bed, the few inches between our bodies had become a no man's land, a cold front line. My soldier's instinct told me that when you don't understand a threat, you don't attack recklessly. You observe, you gather intelligence, and you wait. The anger inside me didn't blaze like a wildfire. It crystallized, becoming a cold, sharp weapon. It was the energy I needed to focus. My mission was now clear. Find the truth. My wait didn't last long. A few days later, the opportunity presented itself, not in a tense confrontation, but in the silence of a Tuesday afternoon. I was looking for some paperwork in our shared home office. Annalise had just gone out for yoga. Her laptop was still open on the desk, the screen glowing brightly in the dim room. I was about to walk past, but a sudden message notification popped up in the corner of the screen. A strange name appeared, Julian, and below it was a line of text that burned my entire world to the ground. Last night was amazing. Same time next week, the air in my lungs was sucked out. Mọi âm thanh xung quanh đều biến mất. Tai tôi udi. All that remained were the cold, emotionless letters on the screen. Every chaotic piece in my mind, the trips to Raleigh, the secret phone calls, the coldness, suddenly fell into place, creating a complete and hideous picture. My hand, as if it had a will of its own, moved and touched the trackpad. One click. The entire chat history opened. I read it all. Every single line. The playful jokes, the meticulous plans, and the complaints about me, about my job, about our life. He's about to have another training session. One of her messages read, "It's so boring. Then you'll have more time for more interesting things," Julian replied with a winking emoji. And then, the intimate words. The words she had once only reserved for me. "I can't stop thinking about you," she wrote. "Me neither, beautiful. What's a soldier's smile compared to yours when you're with me?" This betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate, meticulously planned campaign. She didn't just cheat on me. She built a parallel reality. A world where I didn't belong. I heard water running in the upstairs bathroom. She was home. The anger didn't flare up. Instead, a terrifying calmness came over me. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just watched the screen. A strategist never acts without a plan. Confronting her now would only give her a chance to lie, to cry, to manipulate. I gently moved the cursor, closing the chat window. I put everything back in its place. Without a trace. When she came downstairs, wrapped in a towel, hair still wet, she smiled at me. "I'm home." That smile, those words, had once been my peaceful harbor. Now, it was just a mockery. I nodded, my face expressionless. Welcome home. My mission had changed. It was no longer about finding the truth. It was about controlling that truth and using it as a weapon. I knew that knowledge was power, but at this moment I didn't have it, and I felt completely powerless. All I had was a fragment of the truth, a glimpse into the world Annalise was hiding. I needed the whole map. A direct confrontation now was a tactical error. I needed irrefutable proof. Not to expose her. Not yet anyway. But for myself. To determine the scale of the betrayal before deciding on my next step. Divorce? Salvage? I didn't know. I only knew I couldn't act without reliable intelligence. I picked up the phone, calling Mike. We had served together in Fallujah. Now he ran a private security firm in Charlotte. "Reese," his voice boomed, as solid as ever. "Long time no see." "I need a job done, Mike. Off the books." There was a pause. "Talk to me." I gave him the information. Names, suspicious schedules, locations, no explanation, and he didn't ask. The rule among guys like us. "I'll send you an encrypted file in 72 hours, he said, then hung up. Exactly 48 hours later, the email notification popped up. The file was there. I poured a glass of whiskey. Not to get drunk, but to steady my hand. I opened the file. Inside was what I expected. And more. Photos from public cameras. Annalise and Julian entering the boutique hotel, the Viridian, in Wilmington, having dinner by the river, her hand on his, the smile I hadn't seen in so long now for someone else. Each photo was like a knife. Not a sudden stab of pain, but a sharpening of my anger into something cold and focused. This was the proof, the truth. But then I paused at the schedule analysis. Mike's people didn't just track Annalise. They cross-referenced Julian's activities. There was a clear pattern. On Tuesday, Annalise said she was going to Raleigh shopping and was there for a few hours. On Wednesday, Julian had meetings with local urban planning council members, Raleigh, where the state's main planning office is located. My soldier's logic immediately connected the dots. These trips had a purpose. Annalise might not have known. Just a pawn, but Julian definitely did. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was using her. My suspicion changed. This wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger, dirtier, touching the very values of honor I swore to protect. Julian was playing a dangerous game, and he had dragged my wife into it. My mission changed too. I didn't just need the truth about my marriage. I needed the truth about Julian Devereaux. And to get it, I had to approach the person who knew his secrets best. His wife. My mission now was to confirm. I needed to know if Julian was the kind of man who would use a Marine officer's wife for his own gain. And to do that, there was only one person I could get an answer from. His wife. Cassandra Devereaux. This wasn't an attack. This was a reconnaissance mission. I wasn't here to find an ally in anger. I was here to gather intelligence, to confirm a hypothesis. I met her at a quiet cafe in downtown Wilmington, a place she frequented. According to Mike's intel, Cassandra was sitting alone by the window, elegant, composed, and with a cold authority that Annalise never had. I walked over, my shadow falling over the table. "Mrs. Devereaux?" "I'm Reese Kincaid." She looked up, her eyes showing no surprise. "I know who you are, Major. Annalise's husband." She set her teacup down decisively. "I don't think we have anything to talk about." "I think we do." I said nothing more, just gently pushed a brown envelope across the table. She looked at it, then at me. Her eyes filled with caution. Her hand hesitated for a moment before she took it. Inside were the clearest photos of Julian and Annalise. No tears, no gasping, but her shoulders stiffened. Her breath hitched for a moment. Her elegant fingers tightened around the photos until the paper slightly bent. She placed them down, arranging them neatly, as if trying to impose order on the chaos. "The bastard," she whispered, her voice as cold as ice. "That's not why I'm here." I kept my voice steady. She looked up, this time with curiosity instead of defense. "I don't care who your husband sleeps with," I continued. "I care about why. Do you know that Julian often uses his personal relationships to get information for his real estate deals?" Cassandra narrowed her eyes, the wall of defense going up again. But this time it was different. "Why should I tell you? This is my family's business. I have children, a reputation to protect. Because sooner or later, his recklessness will bring everyone down," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. "Both you and your children. He's playing a dangerous game with people he shouldn't be messing with. The best way to control an explosion is to detonate it yourself, at the right time, in the right place." Silence. I saw the struggle in her eyes. Between protecting her family and recognizing the growing threat, she was smart. She knew I was right. Finally, she sighed, an acknowledgement of defeat, or a decision. "What do you want, Major?" At that moment, I knew I had what I needed. Not a friend, but an ally, someone with the same goal. "I want my honor back," I said. "And I will do that at the upcoming Marine Corps ball." Cassandra's eyes flashed with a cold understanding. She nodded slowly. "All right, Major. Tell me the plan." The plan was set. The stage was chosen. Now, all that was left was to wait for the final performance. The following weeks became an exercise in control. To the outside world, and especially to Annalise, I was a model husband. I was Major Kincaid, a man busy preparing for a critical joint training exercise. It was a perfect excuse for my absences. For the nights I stayed up late in my office, not studying military documents, but perfecting every detail of my plan. I played my part perfectly. I came home on time. I asked about her day. I listened to stories about yoga sessions, charity fundraisers, the clumsily constructed lies. "Did you have a good day?" I would ask, looking at her across the dinner table. "It was all right, a little tired," she would reply, smiling. That smile now looked so forced, like a mask hastily put on. Each of her lies was recorded by me, not in a ledger, but in the memory of a soldier accustomed to analyzing his opponents. I pretended to believe, nodded, and changed the subject. My indifference seemed to disarm her. She thought I was too focused on work, too naive to notice anything. That complacency was her fatal weakness. Meanwhile, Cassandra and I worked in the shadows. We didn't meet in person, only exchanged encrypted emails. She provided me with the missing pieces: financial documents, evidence of Julian's shady deals. She was a frighteningly efficient ally. Everything was done with precision, without emotion. One evening, Annalise walked into my office. She was wearing a silk nightgown, the kind she used to wear to get my attention. "You're working so late," she said, her voice soft. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders from behind. I didn't turn around. I just stared at the computer screen, which was displaying a tactical map. "I need to finish this." She was silent for a moment, perhaps sensing the coldness in my voice. Then she sighed. "You've been so strange lately, Reese." "I'm strange?" I almost laughed. "Just work pressure," I replied, my voice even. "It will be over soon." Yes, soon, everything would be. All right, my way. Annalise's complacency, Julian's arrogance, they were my greatest allies. They were walking on a minefield, unaware. And I was the one holding the detonator. My play was set. All the actors were in position. Now, all that was left was to wait for the final performance. As the date of the Marine Corps ball grew closer, I could feel Annalise's desperation growing. My coldness could no longer be hidden by the excuse of work pressure. It had become a wall of ice between us. She tried to break it with dinners, sweet words, and intimate gestures, things I politely but firmly avoided. She knew she was losing control, and when a person like Annalise feels like they are losing control, they do reckless things. It was a Wednesday evening, just 3 days before the ball. She prepared an elaborate dinner, something she hadn't done in months. Wearing a red dress, pouring wine, she tried to recreate the romantic evenings we once had. I played the part of the normal husband, eating, talking, but I knew this wasn't a normal dinner. This was a stage, and she was the main actress. After the meal, she took my hand, her eyes wide, holding a feigned fragility. "Reese," she whispered, "I have something to tell you." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. She took a deep breath, as if gathering all her courage. I'm pregnant." For a moment, my mind was completely blank. Then a cold, clear thought, like a mathematical calculation, immediately appeared. We hadn't been intimate in months. How could it be? Was this good news, or just a maneuver? I looked straight into her eyes, trying to find a sign of deceit. But all I saw was a perfect performance of emotion. "Really?" My voice was frighteningly even. "Are you sure?" As if she had anticipated my doubt, she gave a trembling smile and pulled a folded piece of paper from her wallet. It was an ultrasound slip, a small, formless black dot on a gray background, with her name and the name of a doctor I had never heard of. "I went to a clinic in Jacksonville last week," she said, her eyes beginning to well up crocodile tears. "I wanted to be sure before I told you." I took the paper, feeling its fragility in my hand. I nodded slowly. "This changes everything." A look of relief passed over her face. She thought she had succeeded. She thought the trap had closed. That same night, after she was sound asleep, I sat in my office, staring at the ultrasound slip. I took a photo of it and sent it to Mike. My request wasn't to check medical records, but much simpler. "Check this clinic for me. Check this doctor. And tell me if Annalise Kincaid actually had an appointment there last week." The answer came the next morning. Short and brutal. The clinic was real, but known for its flexible services. There was no doctor with that name on the staff list. And most importantly, there was no record of Annalise ever setting foot there. The paper in my hand wasn't proof of life, but proof of a calculated, vicious lie. A stab at the very core of my heart. The lie no longer made me angry. It just brought a cold clarity. All hesitation, every last bit of pity I had for her, vanished. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had insulted the very concept of family, of life. and all that I had ever fought to protect. There was no turning back now. The game was over, and at the ball, I would be the one to declare victory. The Marine Corps Ball is not just a party, it's a ceremony, where honor, tradition, and rank are most clearly displayed. The air in the magnificent ballroom of the Cavalier Hotel was thick with solemnity. The majestic dress blues uniforms, the sparkling evening gowns, the carefully polished smiles. It was the perfect stage. I walked in my dress uniform, everything pressed and starched, the medals gleaming on my chest. But the person walking beside me wasn't Annalise. It was Cassandra Devereaux. She wore an emerald green evening gown, form-fitting, exuding cold authority. We didn't link arms or have any intimate gestures. We simply walked side by side, two independent individuals with a common purpose. But in a close-knit community like this, our appearance together created a tremor more powerful than an explosion. I saw them almost immediately. Annalise, in a fiery red dress, was standing next to Julian. The smile on her face froze when she saw me and Cassandra. Her eyes widened in panic. Julian frowned, his usual smirk momentarily gone, replaced by confusion. Every conversation around us seemed to stop. Whispers began to rise. The play had begun. Cassandra and I did nothing. We simply blended into the crowd, accepting greetings from senior officers, smiling and chatting. But I could feel Annalise's eyes burning into my back. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. "Why is she here with you?" I ignored it. A few minutes later, another text. This time from Julian. To Cassandra. I saw her glance at her phone, a barely noticeable smile flickering on her lips before she put it away. Annalise couldn't take it anymore. She was no longer just stunned. She began to act. I saw her say something to Julian and then rush towards us. But she didn't come to me. She intercepted Cassandra near the ladies' lounge. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the intimidation in Annalise's posture and the terrifying composure of Cassandra. Cassandra said a few words and then coldly walked past, leaving Annalise seething with anger and helplessness. Finally, she came to me. At that moment, I was talking to General Miller, my commander, Reese. She grabbed my arm, her voice full of drama, trying to sound urgent. "We need to talk. It's important." This was her last attempt to pull me off the stage, to bring everything into a private argument she thought she could control. I looked down at her hand gripping mine. Then, I looked straight into her eyes. My face was without emotion. "Not now, Annalise," I said, my voice loud enough for General Miller and those around us to hear. "Let's save face." I gently removed her hand, as if swatting away a nuisance. That was the final blow. I saw the self-control in her eyes shatter. Panic, confusion, and humiliation were clear on her face. She stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, completely disoriented. Everyone was in position. The tension had reached its peak. It was time for the final curtain. After General Miller's speech, the lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the annual video presentation honoring military families and community activities. Everyone's eyes turned to the large screens placed around the room. Annalise and Julian stood in a corner, trying to look normal, but tension hung over them like a dark cloud. They thought the worst part of the evening was over. They were wrong. The video began as usual, with touching images of service members and their families. But then, the screen suddenly went black. A chilling silence fell over the room. And then, it began. There was no dramatic music, no narration, just cold images. The first slide had a title, Community Development and Partnerships. Below it was the logo of Devereaux Properties. I saw Julian slightly puff out his chest, perhaps thinking this was a recognition, but then the screen changed to a zoning map of the area. Lots of land around the base were marked in red. Beside it was a list of dates. The next screen A clear photo of Annalise and Julian walking out of the Viridian Hotel. Below it was the date, perfectly matching one of her shopping days. A murmur started to rise in the room. The screen changed again. This time it was a magnified text message, clear down to every punctuation mark. Annalise, I can't stop thinking about you. Julian. Me neither. Beautiful. What's a soldier's smile compared to yours when you're with me? The murmur had now become undisguised gossip. I saw Annalise put her hand over her mouth, her face as white as paper. Julian stiffened, the glass of wine in his hand trembling. But I wasn't done yet. The final screen was a financial statement with unnecessary information redacted. It showed a large sum of money transferred from a Devereaux Properties subsidiary into an account opened by a planning council official. The transaction date: 1 day after Julian met with the official, and 2 days after Annalise's shopping trip. The silence that had fallen over the room was now heavy as lead. No one was whispering anymore. Everyone understood. This wasn't just an affair. This was a scandal. In a community where honor is everything, this was a social death sentence. In that silence, 2 men in smart suits quietly approached. One came to me. Major Kincaid, he said, loud enough for everyone around to hear, and handed me a folder. I took it and turned, walking towards Annalise. She took a step back, her eyes pleading, terrified. I said nothing, just handed her the folder. She tremblingly opened it. Her eyes scanned the words at the top. Divorce petition. A choked sob escaped her throat. At the same time, the second man in the suit had reached Julian, but he didn't hand him a document. He handed it to Cassandra. Cassandra took it and turned to Julian, who was looking at her in disbelief. She placed the legal folder in his hand, her voice cold but clear. This is a notice of asset freeze and a lawsuit for breach of our prenuptial agreement. And all this evidence has been sent to the relevant authorities. The game was over. Check and mate. The room was still enveloped in a terrifying silence, broken only by Annalise's choked sobs. But that silence didn't last long. It was torn apart by a roar of anger and humiliation. You, Julian, his face red with rage, lunged at me. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. He threw a clumsy punch. It was the desperate act of a man who had never had to truly fight in his life. To me, everything happened in slow motion. I didn't back down. I just gently turned my body so his punch harmlessly slid past my shoulder. Using his momentum, I stepped forward. My hand balled into a fist and delivered a precise elbow strike to his side. A dry oof echoed. Julian folded over. The air pushed out of his lungs. He staggered, but his pride wasn't ready to give up. He tried to straighten up, his eyes bulging. "You'll pay for this," he gasped. I didn't reply. Taking another step, I threw a straight punch, short and clean, that landed directly on his jaw. The sound of bone hitting bone was sickening. Julian fell backward, crashing down onto the marble floor, unconscious. No one moved or intervened. They stood and watched as if it were a pre-planned performance. 2 hotel security guards finally came over, but they didn't look at me. They just focused on Julian. "Get him out of here," I ordered, my voice cold and emotionless. They didn't hesitate, dragging Julian's limp body out of the ballroom, leaving a powerful silence behind. I turned back. Cassandra was still standing there, as composed as if she had just watched a boring movie. She just gave me a slight nod, an acknowledgement, a thank you, and then turned and walked decisively toward the exit. Her business here was done. My gaze finally found Annalise. She stood there, holding the crumpled divorce petition, tears smudging her expensive makeup. She looked at me, not with anger, but with horror, as if for the first time she was truly seeing the man I was: not her husband, not a soldier, but a force that had destroyed her world. "Reese, please," she whispered. I stepped closer, the distance between us just a few inches. I didn't shout or insult her. My voice was low enough for only her to hear. "From now on," I said, "you will get nothing. The house, the accounts, this life. It's all over. You will leave with exactly what you brought in." She shook her head, her mouth open but unable to form words. "You took a gamble," I finished. "And you lost." I turned my back, not looking a second time. I adjusted the collar of my uniform, feeling it straight and proper for the first time in months. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind. The battle was over. I had won. In the days after the ball, news spread like wildfire in a great wind. The Devereaux scandal became the topic of conversation everywhere, from golf clubs to ladies' gatherings. But to me, it was just distant noise. I left that house immediately, moving into a temporary officer's apartment. The space was smaller, simpler, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. No more lies hanging in the air. No more feeling of being on guard in my own home. A few weeks later, the fate of the losers was sealed. Julian Devereaux, just as Cassandra had predicted, was swallowed in a legal storm. With the irrefutable evidence she provided, federal investigators got involved. He was arrested for fraud, bribery, and a slew of other financial crimes. His empire collapsed. I read the news, seeing his handcuffed photo, his face swollen and lost. The article also mentioned Cassandra Devereaux, who had taken full control of the company and was in the process of aggressively restructuring it. She was also a winner. I felt nothing when I saw Julian's photo. No glee, no pity, just cold justice. Annalise's fate was more silent but no less brutal. She tried to hold on. The messages, the calls, the belated apologies. "Reese, I know I was wrong. But we had 12 years. Don't throw it away like this." I didn't reply. The divorce proceedings were swift. Just as I had said, she left with exactly what she brought in. Nothing. She was completely ostracized by the military community which had once been her stage with nowhere to go. The last I heard, she had left